This week's episode was brought to you by lowercase p. If you too would like to contribute to the Whole Rabbit's alphabet of illustrious supporters, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your donation of $5 a month will be handsomely rewarded with access to all our extended episodes, a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art, and access to our Discord server, which is a cozy place for silly people. Special thanks to Jackrabbit, Hecka Astra for contributing exquisite research and notes for benefit of episode. Warning! This episode discusses some offensive and politically charged material for people who would like to avoid the guesswork. The Whole Rabbit, despite our bizarre sense of humor, is aligned strongly with the values of liberty and inclusion. We discuss how aesthetics is an important component of fascist movements, which weaponizes beauty and cultural norms to commit violence against those who do not conform with its narrow ideas. If that sounds like too messy of a topic for you today, we suggest maybe going to a jazz club, a burlesque, or a museum near you. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Are you allowed to have sex in heaven once you make it there?
I mean, you could probably think about it.
If there's no sex,
You wouldn't have
I'm
to.
not interested.
Are you an asexual angel?
What I'm curious about is you have to divorce yourself from the world to get close to the spiritual one. But once you make it to the spiritual world, does it have those indulgences? So could Mother Teresa be sucking Jesus' dick right now and we wouldn't even know? She's just gobbling down all the saints' dicks, just dick
I think
after
by the
dick
time
after
you
dick.
get there, handing Jesus a sandwich with some grapes might give you the same amount of pleasure as that.
I believe that the spiritual world is something completely alien to our fleshy comprehension.
Yes.
It's useless to even consider whether or not you could have sex.
And I was just give Jesus a sandwich. I'm wait, you don't eat in heaven either. That's a corporeal thing to do. Wait.
Yeah, y'all are scaring me right now. Are you telling me that nobody's gonna gargle my balls in heaven? This is not a thing?
No.
Look, I feel you, Luke. I used to be very concerned with this when I was 10, 11, 12, and still conservative Christian, because if the rapture came, then I would die before I had sex. That's fucked up.
It is fucked up. It really is. But that means that assumes though there's no orgies with grapes and angels in heaven.
But couldn't you just go spy on one that's happening and get involved that way? Couldn't you just come back down to earth and do that?
I think an angel would kill you if it caught you watching.
Oh.
I think Mari's describing it the other direction.
Oh.
If you were an angel and you got bored and you just started watching people do it.
You'd probably come down and do it too.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And make some Nephilim and some giants up in here again.
Then we can hunt them and make weapons out of their bones.
Yeah.
And it would solve world hunger because they're not technically humans, so we could eat them. We don't have to be vegans or eat bugs. Hooray!
Hello everybody and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we do more than just cover an elephant in food coloring and make it break dance on a giant canvas to Herbie Hancock's rocket, selling the resultant painting for $23 billion to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Nay, we tell you to imagine this occurring as an abstract form of invisible sculpture and charge you the exact same price, because this week we're discussing modern art, the CIA, and fascism. This week, I'm joined by the martial artist of memories, Mari-sama.
Hot titties.
Darth Dingus, the molding and dead.
I ate a habanero and I touched my face.
Malcor 5, who is appearing in this episode in the form of an expressive, one-of-a-kind piece of expressionistic art meant to be experienced through this podcast in the hyperliminal form of esoteric imagination. So please donate $50,000 to my Patreon.
Do it. It feels good.
Feels better than angel sex.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
Hey, you gotta sell the show, man.
Monday.
You know what they say, angel sex sells.
I'm actually kind of playing with the idea of burning some CDs now, because
You should do what I did. It was so fun. Put a bunch of random shit on a disc and then make up a band or an album name for it and then make the art for it.
I have one on Spotify that's the songs that I think about that I like to listen to when I'm thinking about killing myself. And it's called Bloody Forehead in a Padded Room. And it has Saturn devouring his sons on the front.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, see, you should do shit like that. Or call it Rage Quit.
Right.
Every time I think about suicide, I'm like, Mari, rage quitting is for nerds.
I mean, I don't know. I've kind of like been living with it for so long that at this point, I'm pretty sure I'm all right.
Well, a lot of times people that struggle with that have to kind of embrace it and kind of laugh at it to make it stop feeling bad. Like you have to be okay with that fact. You know, when you like try to talk about it with someone and they're like, oh, you know, you could get help for that. And everybody talk to the suicide hotline. And it's just like, okay, well, it's not even worth talking to you about this now.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like to some extent, if your problem is that bad, like the only way that you can the only way that it can even improve is for you to make peace with it.
Yeah. And I don't mean by doing it, you know what I mean? But by acknowledging that that's a thought that you had.
Or making some art with it.
Yeah, totally.
Paint, fucking go beat up a tree. I don't know.
I actually did used to be kind of like good at illustrating. In fact, I'm sure if I sat down for a couple of hours, I'd get a good portion of my skill back because I developed them so quickly. But I drew this one picture of a guy getting a fucking vein pulled out of his neck.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was like my depression picture.
I like to draw gore, but only as like an extreme statement on something.
I like it. I don't think that I like to draw over the top gore. I like realistic violence.
I mean, I do too, but I like it for the sake, not for shock value, but more like to
convey pain.
To convey, yeah. I don't, you know how people just throw it around like, yeah, that's cool, look at the guts and blood. It's like, I'm not really that kind of a gore person. Anybody familiar with Attack on Titan?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people who are really into extreme gore like that because of how crazy it was. But once they got into like the historical political side of things, they're like, this manga sucks. I'm going to go read something else. Berserker is better than this dog. You guys suck. And they left because it was like not constant gore all the time. I'm not about that. Like I like it sprinkled in when it actually means something. Does that make sense?
Like, yeah, it does.
And it can be aesthetic for sure. Like, I didn't think I would like Hellraiser movie. I didn't think I'd like that, but it was just corny enough for me to like it because it's not. I thought they would overplay the gore, and I'm like, actually, it's used in a way that like it makes sense to me. So I don't have a problem.
They don't fucking bombard you with it to the point that you get desensitized, and it's just kind of like part of the look.
It's still mysterious, and it's still an aesthetic, but it's not like glorified. Like, oh, this is the best shit ever. Like Saw to me was that.
It's maturely used.
Like Saw was like a cool idea, but I think it was just too much. It was too gratuitous. Like it was like eating a giant chocolate cake by yourself. It was like, I don't want this.
Oh, well, I don't know. I still think that kind of like I can understand what's not to like about it, but
well, yeah, I'm sure you like
I like
all
that
horror.
kind of shock film.
You like all
yeah.
like or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is another one I use because that to me, like people running from a monster that you know what it is not scary to me. And people getting dragged away and screaming. Teens screaming constantly. Whoa. That's not really the horror. I like more like J-horror and Korean horror where it's like ethereal and you don't know what will happen and no one scream. Like you don't even get a chance to scream basically.
Like
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is cool because of what was happening on set. It was like very hot and it smelled in there. And
the backstory was more interesting to me than the fucking movie.
Well, yeah, Leatherface, the actor, he said like sometimes when he was chasing them down with the chainsaw, he felt like he wanted to really hack them up.
You think he was possessed? I do.
Yeah, the actress that was in like a particular scene, she was fucking scared because this guy was getting really, really close, and like even out of scene, he was saying this crazy shit. Like it was getting to them, the heat, and doing take after take.
Dude.
I think masks have the power to change your personality.
I do too.
Definitely.
That's why I like them.
That's why I like them. God, you're so creepy, dude.
I'm just fucking high. Stop.
I like you. No, I like you anyway.
Thank
it's not
you.
a bad thing.
Thanks.
You can be weird. I'm just like, damn, you're weird.
Yeah. No, you didn't say weird. You said creepy.
I mean, weird and creepy.
Not the same difference.
I mean, I can be both.
Yeah.
Creepy and weird are kind of similar, but not really. Yeah.
Uncanny Valley.
I'm looking at the chainsaw.
That's my chainsaw noise.
Chainsaw goes. Brrr.
So I might not be the best, or the most famous, well-paid artist in the world, but I do make my living doing art. I do murals. I guess that's what you'd call them. They're these large format acrylic paintings that are adorning businesses, and where I most like to put them inside puzzle rooms. So unlike most episodes where I might be able to take a comfortable distance, I feel a little energized and passionate about
this particular discussion. One reason is because I don't think art, or even just modern art, is something that we can really hope to understand in just one discussion. And I think there's plenty of room for art in its various types.
And Dadaism and surreal. Oh,
Well, that was the beginning of that. Yeah, you're just getting into the. I had to take art history for my major. I'm a bachelor of fine. I almost had a bachelor of fine arts, but I have a bachelor of arts. Woohoo! But I did have to take like art history, and I know like my favorite period was from the transition from the traditional to the modern, and that occurs in Europe, not only in Europe, but in simultaneously in America and other places.
around what time period was this? Just curious.
Transitioning away from more traditionalist painting styles, I'd say this was starting in the 1800s, probably.
With like impressionism.
Yes. You have romantic art, the British Romance art period, Impressionism in France and around Portugal and Spain.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just speaking of this briefly, everybody listening to this should check out the Black Paintings by Spanish Romance painter Francisco Goya.
Oh, wow.
There's some of there's some of the darkest pieces of visual art that I've ever seen.
Yeah, Goya. I'm a big fan of Van Gogh. But what these artists were doing is previously the classical painters, they were trying to render the most realistic and most flattering painting they could of reality that they could possibly attain.
The photographers of their day.
And some of the earlier stuff, like in like Roman period, may have looked more like hieroglyphics, but they were definitely trying to shade. And like you have the invention of 1-point perspective and like drawing a 3D thing on a 2-dimensional plane at that point. And then once that form is mastered, that's when you see this modern art start to come out of it. And what they're doing is they're using color, shape, and form to communicate feeling, emotion, or an idea.
It's like geometric poetry.
Yes, because also Pablo Picasso was a famous person in this period, and he started in the Cubism, like he started Cubism pretty much, which led into all of the other, like Dadaism is based on Cubism. So we'll get into all of these art styles, but the modern art period to me is the most fascinating part of art because it changes so quickly and what it's used for, why it arises, and how it's used. Like something could become popular, but then other artists start to use that art form. Like I feel like things really start to evolve at a hugely faster pace in this era.
I see modern art almost as more of an approach to or an attitude about art and how you make it and interpret it, more than like a genre of art itself, you could say.
Well, the entire utility of art itself changed during that time. I would argue it's because the advent of photography.
Yeah, okay, I can definitely see that. And also, I think on this note, modern art's like it's responsible for a lot of the like so much of the entertainment we enjoy today, especially video games.
So I've always had a fascination with video games because they sort of settle some arguments about art, but then I might be changing my mind about that now because I think it's okay to have experimental games that don't have a purpose and don't have an end, that might not even be considered fun. I think that's a perfectly valid form of art. But if you push that stuff to the side, which I don't know is fair to say, games like have to be fun, right? They have to work. You can't just throw paint at a wall and be like, that's a video game. Well, it's like, no, it has to be a game, right? And so I always felt like because games are constrained by certain things inherently, it made them a more interesting piece of art.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have to abide by all kinds of rules that you wouldn't even think about, though. Like, even if you've been playing video games for a long time, there are all sorts of ways that game designers have to coax you into doing, like, making the choice they want you to make so the game can continue at a good pace. You know, you have to come up with just those classic examples of fucking video game logic. Like, okay, you can hit this block with the bottom of this block with your head, and that's where we're going to put the coin. Just all sorts of like weird
training. Yeah, it's a training apparatus. It's like a interactive experience that trains your the way that you react.
Anyways, where modern art comes into this is that without surrealism, you essentially wouldn't even have the artistic premise for that video games could come out of. You know, they're in part technical works, but also you have to bullshit just a little bit just to make the entire thing make sense just to even have a premise for your game.
Also,
Yeah, I think that's what's fun about them.
Also, historically, the graphics cards and the engines were not as good. So it did rely specifically on abstracting things to a literal pixel.
Yeah, especially this. You have to think about like some of the greatest examples of character design in the history of that subject are in video games, because they had to make Mario look recognizable even when he was just constructed with like squares.
Yeah. And you have to know the difference between jumping and dying. So,
And
yeah.
we really could do a whole episode just on video games as an art form.
But the whole idea of perceiving like one or maybe 8 pixels in an array as a character running and jumping, that is based in surrealism. The whole concept of modern art is based on abstracting what we are viewing and the information that we can draw out of even like a few pixels. Now a few pixels can mean a few things to us, like more things to us than they would have if we didn't have modern art to build it upon.
That's an interesting point.
The computers were limited back then, but I feel like now video games are getting more realistic to where they don't have as big as an effect on us anymore, because of the limitation is what makes it symbolically significant.
I guess it's odd, but I feel that modern day video games are also less focused as a whole on their gameplay mechanics
and their aesthetic.
Like it's become a realism contest.
I'm not into that. I'm into the surrealism aspect of what video games can give us and what art can give us, and that's what music could give us. Any of these things that we make, video games are in essence what you create. You create an environmental experience.
Yes.
And interactive, and that's exactly what a video game is. And like literally, this is why I'm so into VR, because VR is kind of shitty still. So it still looks abstracted and like cartoony, and you can really play with it in ways that you can't do in the real world. That's why it's interesting. It's an expressive medium.
What I do is create sets and the background sets for a puzzle experience that you can touch with your fingers and experience firsthand with your friends. So it's a little bit like a movie. It's you kind of know.
Lucas saw.
It's yeah. In the astral mental world, yes, I am.
Yeah.
I like to think of myself as an archon, because life is a lot like an escape room. At least I like to think it is. If you subscribe to the idea of soul contracts, which might be silly or an oppressive, victim-blaming way of looking at the universe, your choice. You come into the world and you say, I want to have this experience and I'm going to pay money for it. And then you're like, okay, I took your money. Now I'm going to tell you the backstory. This is the backstory to the world you're going into. And this is what you know. And then I lock you inside and you have 1 hour to figure it out. And they're like, what am I doing here? And then, you know, this stranded on the beach feeling. And then they start messing with things and you play with things first like a child, right? And then you start to slowly figure out there's something going on here. And the less you try and reverse engineer what's going on and you just experiment, the better you'll have of an experience, so on and so forth. Well, I kind of feel like us religious people and us magicians are almost like that one annoying person in the escape room that keeps wanting to talk to the person running the room. Like, oh, great Mr. God, what do you think of my shoes? It's like, dude, we're trying to play a game here. Or if they're like, tell us the, and when you want a clue, everyone has to agree, because you can't just have one person be like, God, what is the answer to this puzzle? Because it'll immediately take other people out of their experience.
You're like, hey guys, I think we should all have a Bible study and get a clue.
Yeah, you have to collectively agree, right? So us magicians are like the people who are like, hey, game host, let's have a secret relationship so I can get through this room faster. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to fool you and mess with you and tell you whatever to do. You know what I mean? Like the gods, like if you ask the gods for help, they'll help you, but only so much, right? And it's probably
it depends on how you approach them, I think, too.
This is an example of how a modern piece of art is helping me think about life differently. You know, it's like an interactive Truman Show. I think we need to have freedom in the arts. Like I think I stand for that. That's a hill I'm ready to die on. That we need to be able to do whatever in art. But I am fascinated by both the connection to art, aesthetics, and fascism, and also the connection between modern art and the CIA and its clandestine operations, both of which are kind of hot and distasteful topics that get into some very murky territory. And I think the best way to get into murky territory is to talk about David Bowie and Playboy. Once upon a time, David Bowie was being interviewed in Playboy, and Playboy said, "You've often said that you believe strongly in fascism, yet you also claim you'll run for Prime Minister of England. More media manipulation?" Bowie:
Christ, everything is a media manipulation. I'd like to enter politics. I will one day. I'd adore to be prime minister. And yes, I believe very strongly in fascism. The only way we can speed up the sort of liberalism that's hanging foul in the air at the moment is to speed up the progress of a right wing, totally dictatorial tyranny, and get it over as fast as possible. People have always responded with greater efficiency under a regimental leadership. A liberal wastes time saying, well now, what ideas have you got? Show them what to do, for God's sake. If you don't, nothing will get done. I can't stand people just hanging about. Television is the most successful fascist, needless to say. Rock stars are also fascists, too. Adolf Hitler was one of the first rock stars.
Now, this was back in the day when you could just let artists say stupid shit, apparently.
Holy,
That's
I mean,
about to take, man.
can you believe if this man had Twitter? Oh my Christ.
Yeah, no, it couldn't happen, right? But also, this is at a time when, here's the thing. What the fuck is he saying? You know, like,
He's not
He
saying
wants
like
state
he is.
regimented art.
Yeah, he does. He's not a fascist. He just wants the world to be better, and he's saying it in a very twisted way. It's
I think
Okay,
he's
so
impatient. He's
first-
being very impatient.
he was hitting
Yeah,
the Golden Dawn a little hard.
This is actually a facet of some political ideologies. By this definition, Bowie is an accelerationist,
Okay.
which is he has probably an extreme political view, and he seeks to achieve this as quickly as possible. So accelerationists support sowing chaos in some ways, or even voting for opposition candidates in order to create an environment in which they think their ideology could succeed.
So they tear things down to build up their own idea, to do it faster. And I feel like they make a lot of reckless sacrifices that don't need to happen because they're so frustrated and impatient.
Yeah, I really didn't like what he said, honestly.
I have another interpretation. Now, what if he was on a lot of
Okay.
cocaine? And this is what he was trying
All
to
right,
say.
what if? Sure, what if?
What if David Bowie was doing a lot of cocaine and he was
We gotta go
trying?
fast, guys. We gotta go fast.
He was, and it was in some own weird, twisted way his admission of his own knowingness of what he was doing. Meaning, he understood that
Totally.
fascism operated on an aesthetic, and to be an effective artist, that one would have to master the use of aesthetic and the use of pomp and circumstance, the use of riling up a crowd. That's very important for what he means about being a rock star. Getting people to suspend their disbelief long enough to get into a trance state and entrain an entire crowd of people into ecstasy, which is an important part
Okay.
of fascism.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the same thing. It's the same thing.
So I
It has
think
to be at least a palatable aesthetic.
Yeah.
because
Well-
we have David Bowie a little bit to thank for gender bending and allowing a wider degree of freedom and expression, which we might say aided in liberal progress. He said some weird shit on stage, but this is where I'm going. At the same time, the CIA was funding acts that were Leninist in nature, Marxist in nature, anti-establishment in nature, to help propagate the idea that the West and capitalist countries were a place where art could thrive and have a variance of opinion. And there was enough room to have everything, not just traditional forms of art, which only serve, like, if you limit your whole culture to traditionalist forms of art, then you're bending your culture towards fascism, is the argument.
I'm sorry, I kind of spaced out for a second. What was the summary, the last thing you said?
So here's what I said. The CIA knew and has admitted to knowing, okay, let's try this again.
Yeah, sorry.
The CIA knew very well how the fascists and Nazi Germany thought of art and wished to take an opposite approach
Oh, okay, all right. Okay.
and wanted to advance an air of the same, like the opposite for Western nations. They wanted to encourage jazz, gay, Leninist, Marxist, black, anything that was considered abject, or they wanted to help propagate those forms of art so we wouldn't end up in a place that was ruled by some weird McCarthyist form of fascism where every form of art had to subscribe to a certain aesthetic.
Pushing the aesthetics of liberty at the time.
This reminds me of like, I guess you would call them apocalypse cults, or like sects of certain religions that believe that the more sin we have, the faster God's going to come and take everybody with them. Like that's the key to like ultimate salvation, is just let the sin happen, let it prosper, and God's going to come and fix it. Let's do it.
Again with Silent Hill.
I imagine some terrible things have happened behind ideologies like that.
Yeah, I don't want to go into detail what religions did this, but yeah, it's some.
Is it a long list?
It's mainly like Christian stuff. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. Obviously, cultures.
Well, look, everybody
in
knows.
Parts of the world have heavy religion, religious cultures, and.
Malachor, I just want to offer you comfort in this time. Everybody knows that Christianity is fucked up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Glad we got
it's
that
just
out
the
there.
whole idea that there's cults out there, or beliefs that sin is all right. I guess Catholics just forgive you for whatever you're doing, so it's all right to sin.
If you pay.
Why even take the extra steps? Just become a Satanist today.
That's what LaVey said. He said, stop being a part of these religions that are becoming more and more watered down and inauthentic, and just join me already. To go the direction you're already going in, but faster. Like we could, in fact, he would have said we don't even need to do that apocalypse nonsense. You know what I mean? Like we just cancel it. It's over. Like, we're not doing it anymore. Whereas Crowley almost made it seem like, if you read the book of the law enough, the end of the world will come, right? Because it's almost like he had it figured out in that way.
Hey, you serious? I can end the world? Where do I get a book of the law?
He claims that any time it's been printed in mass, that pretty much the world almost tore itself apart each time it got printed.
Interesting.
Okay, so what if just digital copies are being passed around? Is this an exception? I'm sorry.
No, seriously, there's a reason why this stuff happens, and a reason why he would say that, whether it's true or not. And it's because, in my belief, post-structuralism and modern art and modern perspective that perspective works better when applied to religion than it does anything else. If we re-examine our religious mores and our religious aesthetics and the religious messages and the moral messages in our mythology, that's where we're going to get the most value out of messing things up, in my opinion, and re-examining things. Thelema does that sincerely.
All right, so when you refer to the modern perspective, you could say as analyzing these mythologies in a moral context, do you mean that one of the specific distinctions between modern art, what makes something modern and not? Fuck, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this together.
You're not bound to a certain aesthetic or to a certain outcome.
Yeah, you're not looking at things literally though either.
Correct. You're not limited to seeing things literally.
Well, a lot of modern art depends on individual viewers taking their own experiences away from the work of art, right?
Yes. So taking
it's based on individual experience of the perceived. It's based on the perception of the individual. Therefore, it cannot be this like, that's why it's abstract. That's why abstract art is still good, is because everyone gets a different experience from it. And that's the whole point of it. Yeah.
This is actually interesting because I guess
other countries don't allow that because they want to shut down the individual and make everyone one under the state. So yes, I understand what you're saying.
So in Thelema, you take these dominant aesthetics and dominant stories and ideas, and you experience them for yourself, and maybe identify with the underdog in the story, or you're being, man, I'm having a terrible time explaining this.
It's like looking into a reflection in a pond rather than watching a television.
So this is really interesting to me because I guess I had what you could call an enthusiasmos last year myself. And one of the first things that I jumped into as a result of like my initial religious experiences and my growing interest in the occult was alchemy. And I was reading like some of these old texts, and I started to get a glimpse at how I could understand it, or how I understand it to work. And I interpreted it as alchemy is essentially when things change, when things transmute, you know. It's just like the process of something actually transforming.
But it could be
This happens-
anything, right?
Yeah, this happens every day, just in communications or in observance of art. An artist has an emotion. They somehow take this experience and turn it into a strange figure, the strange picture, like Salvador Dali's weird ass stretched head on that canvas,
Or the melting clocks on that weird shell couch thing.
time. Yeah, that one's called Time Transfixed.
I
You know,
love
or
Dolly.
H.R. Geiger's fucking nightmare hellscapes, for that matter. They take an emotion and turn it into that. And then once you have the picture, there's still like another layer of interpretation where it changes, just coming from out of the illustration and into the viewer. There are different reactions occurring in that process.
Some people are disgusted. Some people are in awe and they think it's magnificent, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Let me
really interesting.
So for Thelema, right? The idea is, instead of being like, if religion is your operating system and you know that your operating system of the dominant culture is headed towards the apocalypse with all of those implications, then this would be like experiencing the apocalypse for yourself instead of demanding that all external forms of art and religion be obedient to a certain aesthetic or ideology so that it can be experienced through geopolitical fucking politics in the form of a giant war where everyone fucking dies. The idea is to go through it yourself on a personal level so it can be transcended.
It's not used to serve anybody's agenda, and it would portray that apocalypse as whatever that experience would be to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I find it so fascinating, is because multiple people could look at one piece of art and have viscerally different reactions and like measure like completely opposite reactions to the same thing. That's what really like threw me off about it.
So in occultism, that's doing the work, quote unquote.
But you know what else is cool is a lot of abstract expressionism. Like Jackson Pollock is a good example of this. He started the whole like throwing paint at a canvas. But then you see other artists in the same vein. There's these violent strokes. You see some canvases they're pre-slashed before they're hung on the wall with like knives, or some people stab them with their brushes, make holes in them. And you see all this like weird expressionism going on, and the paint's like, you can see how hard they ground the brush into the canvas and drug it. Jackson Pollock even was rumored to like ride his bicycle on top of it and walk barefoot and with his shoes on top of the canvas while he was working on it. And
Interesting.
and like if you look at it, you can see kind of like the directional of the splash. You know how like if you like throw a can of paint, it makes this cool design on the ground. It's like you can kind of see how the can fell by looking at the paint splash. Abstract expressionism, a lot of it is telling a story through the motion of the strokes and how heavy or light they are. How diluted did they drip? Like all of this it's more of a story for your senses, and it really kind of bypasses your analytical brain. Is like, well, someone just smashed ketchup all over the wall. That's not art, you know? And then your like lower consciousness is actually taking it in a certain way. So,
I remember.
it is, what I'm saying is you can read motion. Not only you can read emotion out of a painting, abstract in this way, but you can read the motion of the artist that made it, or maybe a story of how something is moving, but there's not necessarily a picture of anything in front of you. It's just the stroke and the way that the stroke is done. It's a visual poetry versus old paintings are like, the tree is brown. It has stripes going up and down. That is the bark. You know, like nobody wants to read that. That's not poetry.
I remember my grandfather used to fucking hate Jackson Pollock.
He was a dickhole. Don't get me wrong.
Well, no, he hated him specifically because he saw it as just splashes of paint on a canvas.
If you just
I
sit there
thought,
and look at it, oh my God, it's like, can you imagine the ravings of this man in the room with this paint? Like, I got enjoyment out of it.
Now, that came up in one of my sources that said, essentially, if the CIA wanted to sponsor weird alternative art, they would have to do it through a shell organization because people like Jackson Pollock didn't want to be supported by the CIA. A lot of the people that were supposedly supported by these clandestine supporters, they didn't even know it.
I know who they were. Andy Warhol.
Maybe some of them did, and maybe some of them do now. I think in order to understand why the CIA did that, because we want to be honest about it. In my opinion, this is the weird thing. Like, is Luke ever on the CIA side on this weird conspiracy show? Well, actually, here's the deal. If you like push aside like the Tuskegee experiments, like, you know, experimenting on the public, especially minorities, and just letting them die, and like human trafficking and hiring Nazis and false and like, if you just put all that aside, this whole idea of funding the arts is actually pretty cool. And funding the modern arts and making an environment where, you know, disenfranchised voices have a voice is actually pretty cool. So
this is why folk art is important. Like, you should go to a folk art show in your area to support the local arts.
This is one weird place on this show where I'm going to be like, you know, I think the CIA did something kind of good here. And I agree with their philosophy and how they, like, you know, I don't know. Who knows if there was some other shenanigans going on? I don't have all the deets. But I would like to present the opposite perspective in a cautionary point of view, obviously, because this is what we all want to avoid fascism, right? I mean, if you've gotten this far in the show and you haven't reported us yet, you've probably figured that out.
Luke, are you saying that they opened a Pandora box on themselves?
Well, honestly, the worst way to deal with things is how the Third Reich dealt with things. That's the word. That is what we don't want. We know that
Shut
much.
it down. You can't just shut it down.
We should start with where we don't want it to go. A great way to do that is to go to Nazi Germany, because I think it's somewhat universally understood in our culture that they fucked up. They're messing something up. So and the way they dealt with the arts is a primary example of what we want to avoid. So both Italy and the Third Reich understood the importance of culture in forming national identities. A powerful expression of culture using art itself as a medium can be used to support and propel political agendas. Goebbels at one point expressed to professionals in Berlin film industry that European hegemony would be impossible if we do not make ourselves supreme in the cultural field. In photography, used for propaganda purposes, the subject was always unnamed, but given an archetype for the common German to relate to, such as the farmer, the youth, or the mother, to bring nostalgic relativity of ancestry to the forefront of German people's minds. Lighting effects and posture in photography projected pride and perseverance of the German people. This form of art was used to make connection to their ancestral roots, elevating a national pride for the general populace. Both Italy and Germany founded or reformed national cultural institutes to reflect this back-to-roots cultural movement for political means. Aesthetics would aid in a new political order as digestible form of propaganda for the public. Eye candy that emboldens the national spirit. Aesthetics used in this way for political purposes.
I guess this is actually something I think about a lot in a roundabout way. But, you know, really before like the 1900s, like you didn't even see a series of novels. You didn't have like franchises based around characters. Like this really is kind of also the story of how our modern media and how it's focused around these archetypal characters. And people actually are attracted to series because they like a certain character.
Yeah. So like, I never understood this because every time I enjoyed media, I enjoyed it as an individual. And when I did, you know, when you do fan stuff, like when you fan nerd out, like I would always be like, okay, well, here's my character and here's how I would be if I lived there and there's where I would live. I wouldn't be like, I'm the main character because I'm badass. Like, that's never how I acted. Why do other people not want to express themselves through that media instead of being like, I'm the guy? They're always like, I want to be the guy. And I'm like, but you're not the guy and you'll never be the guy. Can you make your own guy?
So that's why you want diversity in what's being presented to the mass culture, right? This is why you can't always have the white straight male as the hero every single time. It's why that can't be the standard, and why those things are being looked at now.
It's not interesting. If it is every time, it's not interesting and it doesn't grab people's attention. And you know what does? is things that are real and things that people come across that are like, oh, I didn't expect that. Those
Hey.
are the stories that get told.
I just want to throw this out there too. There's really no reason for it to be every single time either.
No.
It's kind of ridiculous. Also, speaking of nerding out, Metroid 5 was announced today, and everybody listening should buy it. So they make another one.
E3 was so lame this year.
That was. I just wanted to see some fucking Metroid news, and I got it. That's all I cared about.
Well, they announced Elden Ring release date, so I'm happy as fuck. Anyway,
Dude, they got flamed. Oh, it was so funny. And I watched for the Intellivision Amico, which is the stupidest video game system I've ever seen, but I like
No.
it's awful, but I love it.
No.
It's terrible, but I love it.
No.
So,
not another one.
So let's say you're a little Native American kid. You're hardly ever, probably never, going to see a Native American main character or even a model or whatever. You're just not going to see that represented in media. And so that has an effect on you. You know, that makes that person more marginalized. They have less to relate to in society. Society has less to relate to with them, you know, so I understand the need for having, you know, diverse perspectives, you know, diversity of voices, diversity of talent, you know, in the arts, right? And the Nazis wanted the opposite. Even music that was relative to the intended aesthetic was embraced, while other genres that weren't were shunned. For example, Beethoven, folk-inspired music would be pushed to the forefront, whereas modern styles such as jazz would be frowned upon.
My dude, can I tell you a story? This was so important to my heart.
Wait, let me say this first.
Maybe.
I mean,
It has to do with what we're talking about.
Yes, music.
Wait. I just want to say that the essential element of fascism is basically that everything is promoted by the state, and everything that is promoted by the state is propaganda for the state.
Yeah.
It's
That's why Mari is asking the dictator of the show, like, may I speak? Does this work with the overall thing? Yes, go ahead, Mari. What's the story?
Well, the other day,
not to say Mein Führer.
Mein Führer, may I speak?
This show's gonna get so canceled over this episode.
I know, right?
We talked
That's why I
about
was like-
literally everything we
I
should
was like-
talk about.
I was like scrolling through the notes, and I'm like, this says Hitler like a whole lot. Oh no.
Hitler hated artists, even though he.
Okay.
But it's a
Well,
I think we
he liked
agree with
fine art.
the zeitgeist, right?
No, we do. But let me tell you my story. This is so insane. Okay, I was watching this interview. Like, do you guys know like Anomaly, the YouTube dude that raps sometimes?
No.
Oh, Anomaly. He's
No.
like this like no, oh, anyway, he's like a not woke. He's not woke. He's awakened. He's like a really cool rapper, but he also does like political commentary and like long format videos on YouTube. But anyway, he was doing an interview, and I commented under the interview like, "Oh yeah, I love these two guys together. Anomaly is one of my favorite rappers. He's like he's good with lyrics. You know, he's very intelligent, and I really like the way like the messages that he puts in his music." And then some dude replied and was like, "Hip hop is garbage. I bet you don't even know real music if it bit you in the butt." And this guy like argued with me like for like 10 posts, like about that hip hop is lame. And I'm like, I could tell that he had not listened to this dude's music, because it's not like clips of old music. It's not like hyped trash, like
It's
edgy
not
bullshit.
Guns
It's
N'
not. It's kind of like, okay, do you guys like Immortal Technique?
I like Immortal Technique.
Yeah.
Dance with the Devil fucks my shit up every
Like-
time I think of it.
Like fucking real ass shit that they like rap into your head, and you're like, oh my damn, I never thought. Like they leave you on the floor like thinking about the world and like your life. Like that's the kind of stuff I like really cerebral stuff. And anyway, this guy is like arguing that I don't know what real music is, and I don't know what analog music is, or like when they had like guitars and stuff. And this was hilarious. After a while, I was like, I can't go in here and be like, oh, I know what real music is. I know the old music too. I know the traditional stuff. I listen to stuff from 1932, and I bet you don't. Like, I'm not going to start that. I just started replying, okay, boomer, to him. Like, And I swear to God, he even admitted to being, yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm a boomer. That means I take out my acoustic guitar and I boom out a cool riff. Or like, he was just saying all this shit. And I was like, I said it like, I like literally had to reply like about 15 times, okay, boomer, before he stopped replying. It was really bad. And I was like, I've never experienced that in my life. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I like how he's trying to say just because I like a hip hop artist means that I don't know what real music is, and I've never heard actual acoustical music that's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is so elitist. What an elitist attitude. It's like, just because I listen to that and I appreciate it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate, like, I don't listen to hillbilly music from the 1920s. Like, fuck you.
You know what? I bet that asshole doesn't even like Rush, so his opinion sucks anyways.
I know. I was so fucking livid, but I didn't even fight the dude. I was just like, okay, boomer, for like 15 lines until he got the picture that nobody cared about what he thought.
Honestly, okay, so this happened to me recently as well. I'll try and make it short. So I was at work and we were riding six to a truck, which is super packed. But somebody came by to help us, and his truck was entirely empty. He came alone. So I rode home with him. And the first thing he starts talking, like one of the first words out of his mouth is, all right, so there's this guy I like to watch. Have you heard of him? He's smart. He's Steven Crowder. And I fucking reach for the door handle.
He's real smart.
Yeah. And and then he starts talking to me about how rap can't technically be music, and how it's kind of like, and he makes this weird analogy for how he doesn't like trans people by saying, like it's kind of just really watering down rock by making other genres. We can't just limitly make these distinctions. But I managed to convince him of an argument as to why rap is music.
Well, rap is music, and you know what? Hip hop also mixes with music much like rock and roll does, and it makes everything better like rock and roll does. It's pretty much the same shit.
I think there's all sorts of shit that can be called music,
That's really good. And the whole point is that the pattern is good and it lasts. Mm-hmm. And it lasts naturally. And that's what Luke is saying, is that we need an open market. We have to have an open and free market. If you can put out whatever you want, if people think it's shit, then it's shit. Who cares? If someone likes it, I don't care. But we need to be able for everybody to put out their art so that free will can determine what is valuable and what is not, and what is taken on to the next level. Because I feel like new media, if you notice, is a lot of clipping and sampling and collaging from older ideas and older memes and pop culture. You get a lot.
Yeah, it's really been the zeitgeist for the past 30 years.
And it's I'm wondering how much longer it can go on like this. You know what I'm saying? Until there's like a singularity where we're like channeling shit from the future and making collages out of that.
Vocalized music.
So this is a big problem, but like, even if if the fascists come to power, we can't listen to Ohio players. Like, what the fuck?
No,
like we can't. That's fucking crazy. We cannot let that happen. That is fucking insane.
It's Vivaldi, Bach, or Beethoven, or the Gulag.
Seriously though, that's why that music was chosen both by the Nazis and by Stanley Kubrick to be used in A Clockwork Orange. I think he was onto a lot of the things we're talking about in this episode. And I believe that might be the big analogy behind that scene where they have that gang fight, right? In the big abandoned theater. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Because it begins with these because each of these gangs has a little bit of an aesthetic to them, right? And this gang's aesthetic that's about to rape this woman has a Nazi aesthetic. And what the hell music is playing in this scene?
Now that I remember
is it Holst?
We had some weird ass music.
Well, here's the funny thing is that they do this. This becomes a trope later. I'm really fascinated by this because you're right. And this is the first part, or the first time that I've seen ultra-violence portrayed with a classical or even like an upbeat, a positive music behind it. It's very interesting.
I believe it's a statement. It's saying that this is the music of fascism. This is the music of violence. This is the music of war. This is the music of raping the divine feminine. This is the music of society destroying itself. And this is the music of social decay. I think that's what he's saying.
I don't think I would agree.
I think conversely, it's also that classical music is about as inoffensive as it gets.
No.
Nobody is
Yeah.
going to be disturbed by hearing classical music.
But it's also a
sing-
weaponry. It's weaponry of the state. It's weaponry of a
No.
fascist government. It's because the Nazis like, well, this is beautiful. This is okay. But the Nazis thought a lot of stupid shit was beautiful. You know what I mean?
I think that was a commentary on how the natural world is people. I don't know. When I saw that, you know what I thought of? You know when they show on National Geographic when animals are like mutilating and killing each other and there's blood everywhere,
that was
and
my
there's
favorite.
like beautiful like tropical music on top of it, and they're like, the lioness takes her prey, so graceful, her muscles rippling as she tears his throat apart. You know, and it's just like that's kind of like the vibe I got from Clockwork Orange, where they put this beautiful music. And classical music is not beautiful because the state ordained it. It's beautiful because there's patterns and elements in it that have to do with nature itself. So
That's true.
you know,
But also,
So-
yes,
Okay, well-
they
but
would
the
say
reason-
that.
but
They
they
would say that
co-opt it.
too.
They-
They would
they
say that
take
too.
but they would
Caveat.
take it. They would take it and co-opt it and pervert it and and pay the artist and use them for the regime. So they co-opt natural symbols. That's what the Nazis did. They took natural symbols away from us, from the people.
Right, so that's why they're
I-
that's the symbolic meaning of the rape that gets interrupted by Alex when he comes in and
But remember when he fucks the girl in his room and it's the do 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 like it just starts playing that and they're like fast forwarded. Like that to me is like it's more of it's a contrast because that's supposed to be prim and like it's beautiful nature and it's like most beautiful like pristine and virginal form, yet it's put on top of sex and violence. It's a beautiful contrast that makes people turn their heads. That's the whole point of it. I don't think that the music itself is evil, but I think that it's co-opted by evil forces to entrance people into it's to hypnotize people into their ideology.
yeah, I didn't mean to say the music itself was evil. I said it was the music of evil
But
Yeah,
that's why
I
they
meant
chose it, because it has that effect on us.
because it's
I meant
beautiful.
that it's inoffensive because it has to be something palatable to the masses.
That too.
Well, it entrains everyone because it's literally rooted in natural tones. Old music, classical music is but the reason new music
Classical music is like a super broad subject, though, involving like multiple eras of different styles of music. Like, I think when you get down to it, pretty much all music can achieve
Not
that.
all classical music was co-opted, though. That's very true.
But most of the music in Clockwork Orange was.
It was co-opted music by not just the Nazis, but
Oh,
also
okay.
other European powers, correct. But there are other types of music from that era that maybe were from different parts of the world that are not used that way. But it doesn't mean the music is evil. It just means that or people could have been paid to make music before then.
I
Now,
think
because-
these days,
Okay.
the government would be making pop music and not classic, honestly.
Well,
It'd
that's
just be
what they
whatever
were-
people know to be good music at the time. I don't know. I had to get that
Well,
out there.
why do dude, that's probably why Germans have been into techno long before everybody else.
Okay,
Because
so
they-
what?
They
Okay.
had to catch up with everybody else.
I have some things to say. I just have to hit pause on you guys for a minute. So what you're saying, how it's based on nature, right? Well, yeah, it is. Also, the Nazis were pretty strict on the art has to be in accordance with what we see in nature. Their paintings had to be pastoral of big open landscapes, of naked men and women that were perfect
What?
in every way, right? And
That's why they chose that, right?
Right, and so that's why they chose that. They chose music that was pleasing, that was in alignment with nature. So I think Kubrick is choosing to portray that here with the rape of the woman in this scene by these, "How art thou, thou globby bottle of cheap stinking chip oil? Come and get
He's
one of the
like-
yobbles if you have any yobbles, you eunuch jelly thou."
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, what he said.
That made
Most
my
de-
yarbles drop.
I know.
And of course he's insulting their manhood. And so they get into a fight. And you see, like, you know, the protagonists in like their white outfits with their, like, it looks like they're dressed in white and they have like the wounds of Christ on them. And later we see Alex DeLarge, who is in his room, videoing such gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh, you know, viewing such beautiful scenes of violence as he slooshies in his room. And he's looking at images of the wounds of Christ, these traditional images of beauty, right? And then he's imagining the violence, and it's only through his therapy, his inversion therapy, that he screams like, "It's a sin! Beethoven never hurt anyone. You know, people should be allowed to live their lives." And but also they're showing him Beethoven's Ninth, his favorite music, to images
they
of the
perverted
Nazis
it.
specifically.
Yeah.
And so is Kubrick.
They ruined it for him.
It's like, I almost don't think there's a scene in Clockwork Orange that isn't dealing with the themes we're talking about in like a visceral, intense, in your face, slap you over the head with a metal bottle kind of thing. Like it's
That's
the whole thing is
crazy,
like
dude.
that. I don't even know. And I know I don't want to end up in a place where there's a rigid aesthetic everyone must conform to.
No,
I get
because
it, you know?
one
Like,
of my favorite scenes in that movie is when he goes to the record shop and the girls are in there eating lollies, and there's like neon lights everywhere and everybody can come in, and there's all kinds of music that you could ever want to have. Like I like that scene, dude.
I think though so Kubrick made sure that the music was being remixed on synthesizers by a transgender
That was
person.
Kraftwerk.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Who did that
was-
scene of the store?
That's Carlos something, but her original.
Fuck! I finally figured it out. Okay,
She's
I'm
a
sorry. This is total aside.
She's trans. She helped invent the synthesizer actually.
There's
Yeah.
There's this Adult Swim short called The Lords of Synth, in which 3 people who are actually based off of like real people fucking duel it out in the synth battle and then save the planet somehow. And she was one of the characters. I just couldn't figure out who that was. Okay, I'm sorry. I was just greatly
No,
excited.
you're dead on. I'm trying to find the name.
It's
Wendy
Adult Swim.
Carlos. You're right.
Wendy
It's Wendy
Carlos.
Carlos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the short she was named Windows or Windows.
March. The name of the song is March. I love that song.
So these were songs that were co-opted by the Nazis, many of them, arguably maybe other fascist movements. And then Kubrick made sure that they were remixed, of course, by a transgender person using synthesizers, which is, of course, the most modern way to present them. And Zizek would say that this is an effective form of disrupting fascism, is disrupting their aesthetic and by imitating it wrongly. And we see this in acts like Leibach and Rammstein and things that, you know, at first you might be like, what the f am I watching? And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a deeper meaning here. Like Leibach is oftentimes accused of being fascist, but they have the swastikas in their videos are made by known anti-fascist artists, right? You know what I mean? And they, at one point they were asked, I think they said, you know, to troll their interviewer in a famous interview, they said, you know, Leibach is fascist in the same way Hitler was a painter.
I think that also kind of illustrates just how difficult it might be to break that aesthetic sometimes.
Yeah.
The Nazis will forever be associated with the swastika, and that's unfortunate for the countries that they appropriated it from.
It sucks because
Yeah.
it's
For the whole
beautiful.
world.
It's a sun symbol and it represents the changing winds in north, south, east, west, and the sun, the year basically. And it's from Buddhism, and they stole it.
And the Native Americans had that symbol as well.
They did, and it means balance. It's a very
all over the world.
basic. They've stolen it from all of the primitive peoples and bastardized it into a symbol of hate. That's why I think I'm a believer of taking back things that are ours.
Okay, interestingly though.
I think we should use backwards ones, like the Buddhist symbol, and re-normalize the old rune symbol.
Oh, Othala?
No,
true.
the it means balance of elements.
Oh.
That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything bad.
You know, it also has a really universal meaning that I can figure out is it's the dipper as it rotates around the pole star throughout the year.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
it's-
understood.
It's a measurement of time of the seasons and plants and how they grow and die. That's literally what it means.
And this is something that goes on throughout all of history where the warlike oppressive power dominates over the artistic and the spiritual and the sensitive one and then appropriates its symbols
should draw the masses along with their stupid plan. Yes.
Because they understand that they need that power in order to achieve their ends.
But
And
I think
oftentimes the masses can't separate the symbol from the meaning.
we should make them, because it's not right.
We should
It's
beat
not
them with
right for them to
cane.
take that away from, you know what I'm saying? Those are rudimentary symbols that they've appropriated, and they're natural and beautiful, and they don't need to be associated with hatred like that. And I get really, really fucking angry when people are like, they look at a backward swastika. They can't even look at a Nazi swastika and recognize it from something else. And I'm like, oh, you don't even really know what you're talking about.
Okay, but
Yeah.
allow me to lighten your mood. Fucking Hitler's birthday, April 20th, is
Yeah.
forgotten because it's 420.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whoa.
hey,
She might have a card. We don't know. We haven't.
Yeah, you
I
might.
live in
Papers.
Atlanta. I'm sorry. I'm
Papers.
sorry.
Papers.
papers.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, boy. I'm sorry, that's an old video.
Sorry, I live in the city. I'm just used to it.
It's okay.
The worst thing you can be is uncool, right? Yeah, so the Nazis did co-opt like those specific types of music and throw out like jazz because they had essentially no taste, because who the fuck doesn't like jazz? Anyway, in November 1937, in an attempt to impress Hitler, Adolf Ziegler, an ally of Joseph Goebbels, would present Die Ausstellung Entete Kunst, or the Degenerate Art Exhibition. Sure, my German listeners are like, what the hell is he doing? To run concurrently with Große Deutsche Kunstausstellung, or the Great German Art Exhibition. Its purpose? To show people what bad art looked like. After all, Goebbels had been shamed fiercely by having his allies thrown from their position as Nazi art judges when Hitler erupted with anger over their submissions to the main gallery. So upset was Hitler with the Great German Art Exhibition's choices, 15,000 in total, that he fired all of them on the spot and hired his personal photographer, a political rival of Goebbels, Heinrich Hoffmann, to approve the submissions for the showing. In a fit of embarrassment survival anxiety gnosis, Goebbels then realized the perfectly unsavory way to re-ingratiate himself with Hitler. Have a gallery run alongside the German art exhibition of the really bad artwork, so people would definitely know the difference. Until 1934, at least, Goebbels, who would eventually become the Reich Minister of Propaganda, so he had to understand the aesthetic pretty well, right? He had a soft spot for expressionist works of art from people like Emil Nuld, Ernst Barlach, Erich Heckel, and others. However, a faction led by Alfred Rosenberg, who despised the expressionists, eventually won out in its dominance of thought after Hitler publicly denounced modern art and its practitioners as incompetents, cheats, and madmen, declaring that there'd be no place in the Reich for them, a sentiment repeated by Adolf Ziegler during the opening of the Degenerate Art Exhibition in 1937. The exhibition was hosted in the Institute of Archaeology in Hofgarten. The venue was chosen for its particular qualities: dark, narrow rooms. Many works were displayed without frames and partially covered by derogatory slogans. The day before the exhibition started, Hitler delivered a speech declaring merciless war on cultural disintegration, attacking chatterboxes, dilettantes, and art swindlers. Degenerate art was defined as works that, quote, insult German feeling or destroy or confuse natural forms or simply reveal an absence of adequate manual and artistic skill. 1 million people attended the exhibition in its first 6 weeks.
Aw, that's a stinker.
I find the beginning of that story, like how all this started with fucking Hitler throwing a temper tantrum, throwing an adult temper tantrum because he saw some shit he didn't like. That's how all this started. That's the context.
This is so bad. He's like Eric Cartman if he ran a fucking country. Like he acts exactly like Kim Jong-un. Do you guys understand this? Like, North Korea is exactly the same thing as this.
This is why Leibach is so genius. They were able to fake it hard enough to perform out of Korea.
I mean, they also ban stuff like this. Like, you're not allowed to have outside media at all. Like, it also has to like venerate the great leader and be perfect and like perfectly Korean.
Leibach is the only band from outside of North Korea that has ever been allowed to perform, period.
Wow.
Look it up. Leibach plays North Korea. That's a unique thing that happened. And then listen to what Zizek has to say about it.
You want to know who else went? Dennis Rodman goes there all the time.
Oh, and there was some kind of fucking exhibition like wrestling match with Macho Man Randy Savage.
Oh yeah, dude, Kim Jong likes his entertainment live. Let me just say it that way.
He
Fucking,
likes all that modern stuff, dude.
you know, he
he
recently declared war, or not declared war, but fucking, he recently declared K-pop to be a threat to the state.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like it is though. He's like, I don't want you to eat and I want you to die and live in prison forever. But
Listen,
K-pop is
shitty.
bad because it make you more feminine and you not make babies. It's like if you want them to die, then why do you want them to have like I don't understand why. Let
It's
them have K-pop.
It's a kleptocracy, and this is, this is it's entirely organized for him to just steal whatever little wealth can be sucked out of this Asian West Virginia of a country, you know.
But the only people that make music there or get to play there are people that agree with the regime,
Oh, no, you don't have a choice but to agree.
or you don't leave.
They have to agree fervently.
It's
And
sick.
the people
So-
who do get to leave pretty much are brainwashed enough that they know they won't try to escape.
Anyway, back to the old,
Back to
fascist
the
threat.
old, fascist threat.
It didn't start in that museum freakout. It started when he was 18, when he applied to Hitler, the Vienna Academy of Arts. Despite the fact he passed the initial entry exam, he was rejected due to his skills being unsatisfactory. Hitler still moved to Vienna despite the Academy's rejection. This early failed attempt to be an artist seeded a long-standing contempt for any art that was supported or displayed, especially museums, if he found it to be
Oh.
too modern or uncivilized. Hitler painted mostly landscapes. Being that landscapes were the subject of his rejected paintings, he was especially offended by modern art. While still living in Vienna and struggling around between homeless shelters and cheap small apartments, Hitler sold his watercolor and oil paintings of local landscapes to support himself. One could argue that due to the fact that he was capable of selling these paintings, his feelings only strengthened his biased distaste for the Vienna Academy of Modern Art. During this time in Vienna, his paintings during the day continued while he studied at night. This is where he developed an interest in politics and a few years later moved to Munich.
Mm.
God, it's just like for a moment you almost feel sorry for him, like with the whole rejected artist thing. But
I
then,
can't.
yeah, then you realize that he's just so fucking evil that he took this and enforced it upon an entire country
This
by
is like
eliminating every. It's his narcissism.
this is like if literally it's Cartman from South Park if he took an art class and he was like, I know everything about painting. I'm gonna paint a landscape. It looks great. And then his teacher is like, these other paintings are better than yours, and they're just like blobs of color and squares and lines and stuff. And he's like, fuck those guys. I'm gonna kill those guys. And like that's literally how the war started.
Well, he is anti-Semitic and he is portrayed as Hitler a few times in the series, probably for this reason.
I mean, perfect.
So, within months of the Third Reich coming to power, several government-funded bodies of European arts and culture were established. This included art museums, films, literature, photography, music. The purpose of this was to direct citizens toward a defined cultural ideology, which tied in directly with political movements. These arts were used to define the people and tell them what it meant to be German, an underlying message of cultural superiority compared to and contrasted with uncultured or degenerate countries or peoples. The perceived threat that liberal democracy posed to them was intertwined with this and expressed through art. This heavily biased critique was pushed to the citizens through museums and literature. The experiences of Hitler with his rejection from the Vienna Academy are historically and culturally significant because it plays into the evolution of art as a tool for politics even today. So these experiences created a very deep rooted bias that would spill over and integrate into the political agenda and ideology of the Third Reich and ultimately the German people. The depiction of America among other countries as being uncultured necessitated a response from the CIA by means of cultural funding and events, especially post-World War II. Hitler's early rejection started a tremendous chain of events that evolved alongside politics. Into and beyond World War II, this subliminal and subversive political tactic of politically funded cultural arts is still utilized today. The CIA continued to fund cultural arts because of how effective the strategy was. The Festival of 20th Century Masterpieces of Modern Arts 1952 is an example of this. The festival was tailored to clear the name of America as uncultured.
Oh.
And if you'd like to hear more about rejected Nazi art, CIA psyops, modern art,
And who's afraid of red, yellow, and blue? Please pay me money at www.patreon.com, where $5 gets you access to all the extended shows, stickers of our art, and access to our Discord server where we talk about things we probably shouldn't. So with that in mind, thank you everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
No, seriously, there better be sex in heaven. I'm not even kidding.